Hey, hope you're doing well. My name's Austin, and welcome to episode 9 of nexgen. In this episode, we're going to go over some of the new things that Apple announced at the Worldwide Developers Conference 2023. So this year, Apple came out with a lot of the usual new software updates, such as iOS 17, as well as new updates for Apple TVs, Macs, and the Apple Watch. But this year, we also got some really interesting new announcements. So in this episode, we're going to go over some of the things that they came out with. So first up, we have the brand new Macs that Apple announced. So for a while now, we've had the 13.6-inch MacBook Air that was updated over the 2020 version, but this year, Apple came out with a brand new 15.3-inch version of the same MacBook Air. Everything is basically the same as it was before, just with a bigger display. In addition to that, we also got a price drop for the 13.6-inch version. So before it was $1,200, and now it's going to go on sale for $1,100, while the bigger one is going to go for $1,300. We also got an updated Mac Studio as well as a new Mac Pro. Both of these are going to have M2 Max as well as M2 Ultra chips, and from what we can tell, it seems like the main difference between them is things like thermals as well as upgradability, as the Mac Pro has a number of expansion slots in case you want to upgrade it later on in the future. So Apple does have one more bit of hardware that they came out with, but I will save that for later on in the episode. For now, though, I do want to discuss some of the software upgrades that Apple will be bringing later on this year, presumably by the fall. So first of all, Apple is coming out with iOS 17 with a lot of mostly quality of life features, not too many nothing that's really going to revolutionize iOS or anything like that, but a lot of little improvements to help make it just feel that much nicer to use. So first of all, Apple announced what they're calling contact portraits. Now, these are very similar to the lock screens that we got from iOS 16, but basically you can tailor make them for your contacts. So basically you can take a picture of yourself, for example, and then have the text of the name, in addition to changing the font as well as the color of the name. And this will appear in several different places. For example, it'll appear in your contacts, it'll appear whenever you get a phone call, and it'll also appear in a brand new feature that Apple's adding called Name Drop. So Name Drop works along with AirDrop to allow two iPhone users to share their contact information. You just bring the two phones close to each other, and you can swap contact information with each other. Basically, it's a way to make it a little bit easier in case you want to share your phone number with someone. In addition to all this, Apple added a new feature to the phone app called Live Voicemail. So as it is right now, whenever you call someone and then they don't pick up, you can leave a voicemail after the call. But with this new feature, what's going to happen is that people can leave a live transcription while they're ringing the phone, and that will allow someone on the other end to see if they need to pick up the call immediately. In addition to the new phone features, we also got a lot of new features for iMessage. For example, Apple came out with a feature called Check-In, which basically allows people to check in with someone else to see if they reached their destination properly, as well as other things like a swipe to reply feature, where you can basically just swipe a message to reply rather than having to tap and hold first. We also have other features like search filters, the ability to share and request other people's locations, transcriptions for audio messages, as well as a sticker drawer that will hold all these your stickers, emojis, and your memojis. We also got a new feature for FaceTime, where basically you can leave a voice or audio message for missed calls. So basically it's kind of like a video version of voicemail. In addition to all of that, we also got a new feature called Standby. So basically Standby is a way for Apple to expand MagSafe a little bit, as if you have your phone charging while rotated horizontally, it'll essentially turn it into a mini smart display. So you can see a variety of different widgets like clocks, calendars, your live activities, music, you can enable Siri, and things like that. We also got what Apple is calling interactive widgets, which is basically a way for people to directly control different things from their widgets. Basically, it's kind of like how Apple used to have it on their old version of widgets, as well as how Android widgets are as of right now. So for example, if you have a widget for reminders, you can check off reminders straight from the widget without having to first go into the app. So in addition to the name drop feature that I mentioned earlier, we also got a couple of other upgrades for AirDrop. So for example, if you want to share a file with someone else over AirDrop, they added a new feature where you can just bring two phones close together to initiate an AirDrop or a SharePlay session. In addition to this, Apple also announced a new feature for AirDrop over the internet. So basically what that means is that if you were to share two files with each other and then get out of range for AirDrop, it will still send the file over AirDrop. So basically you can just get out of range and everything will still send properly. We also have a variety of other new features, such as a new journaling app, improved autocorrection and auto predictions for typing, new upgrades for Apple Music that can let people share music in the car using SharePlay, or have collaborative playlists and multiple people can add to one playlist, a new AirPlay in hotels feature, the ability to download maps for offline use, the car chargers along map routes, new upgrades for Siri, where you can basically say Siri instead of Hey Siri, as well as back-to-back requests for Siri, without having to say Hey Siri once again, a new visual lookup features where you can find search results from photos and videos, new health features for mental health and vision, as well as the ability to use your iPhone with your Apple TV for video conferencing, which means that Apple TV is now going to have apps like Zoom, WebEx, and FaceTime. So those are all the new features that are coming to iPhone later on this year. In addition to all that, we also have some new features coming to AirPods. So first of all, Apple announced a new feature called adaptive audio, which is sort of a way to blend transparency mode and noise canceling. So basically what this means is that, for example, if you have adaptive audio turned on, it'll block out some of the higher noises that you'd want to keep out, while also letting in other noises that help you be more aware of your environment. The example that they gave in the keynote was, for example, allowing, you could hear the sound of a bicycle coming by you, but it would cancel out the sounds of other loud noises around you. So basically it's just kind of designed to give you the best of both worlds while still allowing you to enjoy your music. In addition to that, we also got a new press to mute feature where basically if you're on a call and you were to press the stem of your AirPod or click a button on your AirPod Maxes, then it will automatically mute and unmute your calls. And other than that, we also got upgrades to the automatic switching between devices where now it works a lot faster. So now we've gone over all the new iPhone and AirPods features. Let's start to go over some of the new features coming to iPad. And of course, a lot of the iPad will get all of the new iPhone features since iPadOS is basically just kind of a branch off of iOS. But in addition to all the new iPhone features, we're also getting a variety of other iPad-specific features. For example, iPadOS 17 is getting the upgraded lock screens that we got from iOS 16. This involves features such as the ability to have multiple live activities show up on your lock screen, as well as having a big stack of widgets on the left side of your screen. In addition to this, we also have a new feature where you can use your live photos that you take to use as motion wallpapers. In addition to all this, we also have brand new features for PDFs. So for example, if you were to open up a PDF in the Files app, you now have autofill for different text fields. So for example, you can autofill your name, address, phone number, and other fields like that. You can even use the Notes app to annotate PDFs as well as collaborate with other people to work on PDFs in real time. In addition to those, we also got a bunch of other features such as the ability to link related notes in the Notes app, some new tools that are available in the Freeform app, a new follow-along feature in Freeform so you can see what other people are seeing at that time, more flexible window support in iPadOS, as well as the support for external cameras. Now I want to talk about some of the new upgrades coming to macOS. Before I do that, if you're enjoying this episode so far, I'd really appreciate it if you follow the link in the description to join my newsletter. So every week you'll get new podcast notifications as well as extra free content every single week. It's free, and if you don't enjoy it, then you can always feel free to unsubscribe later if you don't like it. But in terms of the new macOS Sonoma, we're basically getting all of the new features that we've got from iPadOS in addition to a few other features. For example, you can now place widgets on the desktop as well as use, or rather import, widgets from your iPhone. So for example, if you have an app that you download on your iPhone that you have a widget for, but you don't have that widget on macOS, you could just import it straight from your iPhone and it'll show up on your desktop. We also have brand new video conferencing features for FaceTime as well as other apps like Zoom and WebEx. So for example, we have new features for screen sharing and for you appearing on the screen in what Apple calls presenter overlay. Basically, this positions you in front of whatever you're sharing on your screen to basically make it feel a bit more interactive. There's also a new feature where you can create reactions using your hands. So for example, if you're to give a thumbs up, then it'll basically show confetti behind you on your screen. We also have new upgrades for Safari, for example, the ability to now have web apps on your dock. So basically, if you open up a web app on a website, you can import that to your Mac and access it directly from there. It's very similar to the feature on iPhone Safari where you can just add a website to your home screen. We also have new profile features, so you can basically separate your tabs, extensions, and whatever between different profiles, as well as a new ability for people to share passwords and passkeys with other people through iCloud Keychain. And finally, on our list of software upgrades, we have watchOS. So for the new version of watchOS, we're going to have things such as apps making better use of the space on the screen, as well as new widgets on the watch face. And basically what will happen is that throughout your day, these widgets will cycle out to show you front and center the one that's most relevant to you. So for example, if you have a meeting coming up, it'll show the calendar on the top of the stack. In addition to that, we also have the ability to press the side button to open up your control center, as well as other features such as features for cycling, hiking, trail information, topographic maps, elevation alerts, as well as new health features for mental health and vision. And while we're on the subject of vision, Apple came out with one really big new release at the end of the keynote. So for a while now, we've basically had these same devices that Apple's come out with for years now. We've had the iPhones, the Macs, AirPods, and such. But this year, Apple is releasing a brand new device that's basically in a whole other category and what they believe will basically start to open up a new generation of computing. So Apple's calling this the Vision Pro, and it's basically a mixed reality headset. So if you're not familiar with mixed reality, basically it's a combination of two other technologies called augmented reality and virtual reality. Virtual reality is basically a technology where you put on a headset or such, and you can it basically places you within a sort of virtualized 3D environment. Augmented reality is similar, but rather than create an actual environment around you, it'll just use your own environment and place objects within it. And that's kind of the big focus of this new headset. It integrates both elements of AR and VR, but it'll focus mostly on augmented reality. In terms of hardware for this new headset that Apple's making, they really tried to put a focus on high-end premium hardware. And that's kind of important given the price, but we'll get to that later. Basically, rather than being made out of plastic like a lot of other headsets are nowadays, this one's actually made entirely of metal and glass. There are also two speakers on either side, which allow for spatial audio, as well as having two displays within the headset itself. Basically, one display for each eye because that's how you have to get the technology to work. Basically, these are micro OLED displays, which are basically like similar to the displays on your phone, but because they're micro OLED displays, the pixels are placed much closer together, so it's a lot denser. And I believe this is to help combat a typical effect that you get in a lot of headsets like this called the screen door effect. So basically with a lot of VR and AR headsets, what happens is the displays are so close to your eyes that you're able to see through the pixels. So basically you can see the lines in between each of the pixels, and hopefully with these new micro OLED displays, Apple will be able to help combat that. What's interesting is that Apple said that these displays have more pixels than a 4K TV each for each display. And I believe these displays run at about 90 hertz, which means that these are very smooth, very high resolution displays. In addition to all that, Apple has put 3D cameras on the front of the display. Now, this isn't just for measuring the environment, although there are a lot of cameras and sensors that are going to be used to help map your environment. But these cameras are specifically designed for video and photos. So basically what happens is you can take videos and everything will appear 3D. Apple also has a display on the outside of the headset, which is used for a feature called eyesight. So basically what that means is that it'll basically take your eyes and display them on the other side of the headset to make it almost look like you're looking through the display. In case that sounds like it might seem a little weird and almost a little bit creepy, it kind of is if you actually look at the pictures of this in use. But in addition to all this, to get this to run properly, Apple has two chipsets inside the headset. So first of all, there is an M2 processor that's responsible for processing the apps as well as the new operating system, Vision OS. There's also a brand new R1 processor that's specifically responsible for processing the input from the new sensors and cameras that are used to map out the environment. And basically the whole Vision OS is basically its own system that can allow it to not only run VR versions of existing apps, but also run iPhone and iPad apps. So basically the plan is to have apps displayed on windows that basically look like they're appearing in your environment, but also have new apps that are designed for virtual reality focused experiences. So for example, the app Sky Guide, which is responsible for allowing people to point their phone at the sky and see different constellations and such, basically mapping out the night sky. The Vision Pro will essentially allow you to put on the headset as well and then look up at the sky in a sort of virtual environment. So typically what we see from a lot of headsets like this is usually the idea of having some kind of controllers that you put in your hands and let you interact with the environment around you. But what Apple has planned for this instead is to allow you to control everything using your hands, your eyes, and your voice. basically how this works is that you look at an object on the screen and then create a pinching gesture with your fingers. So you just tap your fingers together and you can select whatever it is that you're looking at. And then you can also look at a text field. So for example, if you're in Safari and you want to search for something, you can simply look at the text field wherever you want to enter text and either use your voice, you could use a keyboard that appears in augmented reality, or you can connect a physical keyboard and type from there. One of the big benefits that Apple is touting with this headset is the ability to have multiple apps open at once and basically have sort of a virtual workspace where you have multiple displays. So basically they compared it to sort of like a multiple monitor setup where you have an app running on each individual display, but instead of using actual physical displays, it shows it all as basically like floating windows in your setup. During their keynote, Apple said that there may be times where you want to have an app appear bigger than it would be in your physical space. And in order to do that, Apple added something called immersion mode. So basically how this works is that you have a digital crown on the top right of your headset, and if you were to turn that, you can turn up and down immersion. So basically what that means is that as you turn up immersion, it'll create a sort of virtual environment in front of you where the app will be located. So basically it kind of gives the illusion that there's a much bigger space in front of you. One of the use cases that Apple gave for something like this is the ability to watch movies. So for example, if you have your headset on and you were to turn up immersion mode, you can basically have a movie playing in front of you, and then you can basically make it as big or small as you want it to be. You can make it as much as like 500 feet big if you wanted to, or you can make it just super duper small. In addition to all this, Apple also announced the ability to use FaceTime and other forms of video conferencing on the headset. You might be asking, well, how can I do that? If it's just a headset, how can it track my face? How can it track my body movements and all that? And that's all coming through a new feature called the ability to create a digital persona. So Apple said that during the keynote that if you were to take the headset, when you set it up, you can basically have a scan of your face and it'll create what it calls a digital persona, which is basically a mostly realistic 3D model of your face. Anytime you do a video conferencing call or a FaceTime call, it'll basically use your digital persona and then use the cameras to track your movements. Unfortunately, Apple says it can only run the headset for about 2 hours at a time, and all of this will run out of a separate battery pack. So the battery isn't actually built into the headset itself. It's completely separate from the device. You slip it in your pocket while you have the headset on. Fortunately, though, Apple does say that you can plug the headset straight into the wall if you want to use it for longer periods. Sadly, though, this will be one of the most expensive products that Apple has come out with in a while. So just for comparison, right now you can pretty much buy a 16-inch MacBook Pro starting at $2,500. This headset is going to cost $3,500 when it's released. Apple did try to basically justify the price by comparing it to a multi-monitor setup and a theater with 3D surround sound speakers and such, and even saying that it could even outperform them. I don't know if it would do that, and I think that would still, even such, be outside most people's budgets. But if you are interested in picking it up, that is how much it will cost. What I find most interesting about the Vision Pro is the focus on it compared to other similar headsets. So a lot of other companies like Facebook, for example, have been focusing a lot of their efforts into what they're calling the quote-unquote metaverse, which is basically going to be sort of like a social environment for a lot of people to connect in virtual reality. And a lot of these headsets, because of that, have a focus on virtual reality with some extra augmented reality features like the ability to swap between VR and AR. Apple, though, seems to be taking a much different approach with how they're going with it. So rather than being a social networking tool, it's basically a standalone computer. Its main focus is designed toward running multiple apps side by side, as well as basically just using it kind of like a futuristic version of something like a MacBook or an iPad. But yeah, that's everything Apple announced this year. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for listening. And if you did, feel free to follow the podcast, subscribe to it wherever you're listening from. And also, like I mentioned earlier, feel free to join my email list if you want podcast notifications and more free content. Also, feel free to share it with someone else you know. And until next week, I'll see you guys later. Adios.